Bro, Lloyd Ruhl, aka MegaBlitzz. In today's video, we're going to be looking at and ranking all the ace specs coming out of Temporal Forces with a little bit of a surprise thrown in there. With rotation happening for in-person events on April 5th, but for online play happening this Thursday, I feel like now is a great time to kind of just go over and rank and look at all the ace specs that we're going to have available to us. So let's jump right into it. Alrighty, and here we are at that tier list. But before we start talking about all the ace specs here, I'm going to give a huge shout out to ZapdosTCG for actually providing the tier list for us to use in today's video. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it, ZapdosTCG. I'll make sure to put a link to his channel in the description below, so if you want to check out his content, you'll be able to. Now, starting off with that surprise that I was talking about being Survival Cast. Now, we're not going to have access to this ace spec for quite some time, actually, because it's not going to be coming out of Temporal Forces. It'll come out either in our Crimson Haze or our Twilight Masquerade equivalent set, I think. But we do know what the card does. So Survival Cast says, if the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP, it would be knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon. That Pokemon is no longer knocked out, and its HP becomes 10, and then you discard Survival Cast. The problem with Survival Cast is it's so niche in what it's trying to do, and it's so specific, because you have to be at full HP, you have to get KO'd by damage, so Star Requiem and Frenzy Gouging won't trigger Survival Cast to work, and then you save yourself from getting KO'd, but your HP becomes 10, so you have to hope that whatever was trying to KO your Pokemon, you can try to counter KO that following turn. I could see this maybe having like a spot in like a Roaring Moon deck potentially, but not enough that it would be over any of the other ace specs. So for those reasons, I have to put it down here in the D tier. I just think it's too specific in what it's trying to do, and I don't think it fits in any of the decks that we're going to be seeing. So Survival Cast down here in the D tier, unfortunately. Moving into our next ace spec here, we got Neo Upper Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides 1 colorless energy. If it's attached to a stage 2 Pokemon, then it provides every type of energy, but only can provide 2 at a time. Now, Neo Upper Energy might get played in some rogue decks like Tinkaton EX or something, but being on only stage 2 Pokemon and not stage 1 and 2 Pokemon, I think really limits it. With Charizard EX and Gardevoir EX being the more prevalent stage 2 Pokemon in our format, they don't really need Neo Upper Energy because they can power themselves up with their abilities, Charizard EX's Infernal Rain and Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace ability. So if this said stage 1 and 2, I feel like it's going to be a way better card because then it opens up for different decks like maybe Banette EX or like Spite Ops EX for being the first ones that come to my mind to be able to play with this card. But unfortunately, being limited to stage 2 Pokemon, I feel like it really hinders it. This card might get better over time when we get more stage 2 Pokemon in later sets that have very strict energy requirements, and Neo Upper Energy could fit into those decks. But I'm going to put it down here at the bottom of C tier. I don't think it's unplayable by any means. I just don't think it's better than a lot of the other ace specs that we're going to be seeing here. Moving into our next ace spec, we got Awakening Drum. Draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. So you are capped at 6 at a perfect scenario. Having 1 ancient Pokemon in your active spot and then 5 on your bench would let you draw 6 cards. Drawing 6 cards off of an item is pretty good, and with an ancient box deck already being a thing that we've seen in Japan, Great Tusk Mill being something that plays a lot of ancient Pokemon, or maybe like Roaring Moon or something of those equivalents, could play Awakening Drum. Being able to draw 6 cards off an item and still have your supporter to play for the turn is kind of insane, but the realistic part of it is most of the time you're probably not going to be drawing 6 cards. You're going to be drawing, let's say, like 2 to 4 most of the time, which is still pretty good, but I just don't think it's enough to put it any higher than like the top of C tier here. It's just not that great, and I feel like it's really limited because it's capping it at the Pokemon you have in play. I feel like this card might get better if it was like maybe ancient Pokemon in your discard pile or something, because then you could draw maybe up to 10 or 11, because Explorer's Guidance lets you look at the top couple cards of your deck and then discard the other 4 out of those 6. So I could see maybe if they would have changed it a little bit, it could get better, but I don't think it's a bad card by any means. Moving into our next ace spec here, we got Reboot Bot. For each of your future Pokemon in play, choose 1 basic energy from your discard pile and attach it to that Pokemon. So early game, Reboot Bot's really bad because you're not going to have a lot of energies in your discard pile to attach to your future Pokemon. However, with Future Box being a deck that a lot of people are talking about, and we probably will see a good chunk of it, at least maybe with like an Iron Hands equivalent or something, being able to have a bunch of energies in your discard later on in the game, and then being able to just choose each of your future Pokemon and then attach at least one energy to all of them can be pretty good. It really helps power them up later on in the game if things start to kind of turn to your opponent's favor. So I think it's playable, and I think it is a decent Ace Spec, but I don't think it's great by any means, because you need to have energies in your discard pile. It'll work better later on in the game, but I feel like it's one of those things where we have that Miraidon that uses its peak acceleration attack to get energies powered up. If you're going to be playing Future Box with Iron Hands, you're probably going to be playing Electric Generators as well. So there's just other cards that you can play that I feel like will do it a little bit better. So for those reasons, I'm going to have to put this at the top of C tier. I think this card could potentially go into B tier as well, but I think it is going to be down here in C tier, unfortunately. Moving into our next Ace Spec here, we got Master Ball. Master Ball literally just lets you look for whatever Pokemon you want, reveal it, and put it in your hand. Master Ball, as much as I would love to put this higher, I think it's only going to be in like the bottom of B tier. It really only gets played in like Lugia V-Star for the most part, being able to find your Archeops or maybe your Cinccino's or whatever missing piece you may need. But I don't think it gets played in like any other decks really. Master Ball isn't going to see play in things like Charizard or Gardevoir or, you know, Stall potentially. I don't think it sees play in any of those decks because, well, there's better Ace Specs for those decks. It will see play in Lugia, but that's about it. But it's going to be insanely good in Lugia is why it's going to be up here in the B tier. Moving into our next Ace Spec here, we got Hero's Cape. Hero's Cape literally just says the Pokemon this card's attached to gets plus 100 HP. I think Hero's Cape's a really good card. I have seen people playing in Snorlax Stall, which makes sense because Luxurious Cape sure gives it a lot more HP, but it makes them take an extra prize card. So a lot of people have been playing Bravery Charm in Snorlax Stall, so they don't end up taking that extra prize card. Hero's Cape is just a bigger Bravery Charm that doesn't let them take an extra prize card. So I could see Hero's Cape getting played in things like Snorlax Stall, but I've also thought I could see Hero's Cape getting played in like a Torterra EX deck, where Torterra EX doesn't do a lot of damage because it's capped at 150 with its Jungle Hammer attack, but it also heals 50 damage from itself. So Torterra EX has 340 HP. Put a Hero's Cape on it, you're at 440 HP. That's a bulky Pokemon. So I'm going to put this down here just slightly above Master Ball because I think Hero's Cape can get played in more decks than Master Ball can. But there's other options that you could use instead of Hero's Cape. Like in Snorlax Stall, you might use like Prime Catcher or Unfair Stamp. But I think Hero's Cape is still a good enough Ace Spec to put it at the top of B tier. Moving into our next Ace Spec here, we got Unfair Stamp. Now, Unfair Stamp is not in the Temporal Forces set. It'll be coming out in a later set, so another surprise here. It's going to be coming out, I think, in the Crimson Haze set, but we had access to talk about it, so I wanted to talk about it. Unfair Stamp says you can only use this card if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player will shuffle their hand into their deck, and then you draw 5 cards, your opponent draws 2. So it reminds me a lot of like Reset Stamp or kind of like Roxanne, where Roxanne you need to have less prize cards, you have less than 3 or 3 or less to be able to use Roxanne, but Reset Stamp was each player shuffles their hand into their deck and then draws the amount of cards equal to their prize cards. Reset Stamp was really, really strong and really popular in the format when it was in Standard. Unfair Stamp requiring a Pokemon to get knocked out and then being able to kind of limit your opponent to 2 cards and then you draw 5 off of an item and still having your supporter to play is really, really good. And I think Unfair Stamp is going to get played in quite a bit of decks. It's going to probably get played more in like control decks. Maybe Snorlax Stall might play it or something of that nature. But I'm going to put it up here in the bottom of A tier. I think Unfair Stamp has a lot of potential, and I think if you don't have, you know, maybe like a Prime Catcher to play in like your Snorlax Stall deck or in whatever deck, Unfair Stamp is one of those ones where you can kind of just put it in your deck and it would make sense to have it in there because it can fit in literally almost any deck. So for those reasons, it's going to be up here in A tier, the bottom of A tier, just purely because of its flexibility that it can be in any deck. So moving into our second to last Ace Spec here. We got Maximum Belt. Attacks used by the Pokemon this card is attached to do 50 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. I think Maximum Belt is a great Ace Spec card. I think it's going to open up for a lot of things in the format to be able to one-shot other things. Chen Pao having 220 HP, Arceus decks are going to have a tough time trying to potentially KO it. But if you don't have a DTE on Arceus V-Star and then you put a Maximum Belt on it, you're past that 220, so you're KOing Chen Pao's. But the best thing about Maximum Belt is putting it in a deck that plays Giratina V-Star. Giratina V-Star's always had a really tough time being able to KO Charizards with that Lost Impact attack because it's at 280 and Charizard has 330 HP. But that Maximum Belt will bring it right up to a perfect 330 damage to be able to KO a Charizard EX with that Lost Impact attack. So now, something else that's really cool about Maximum Belt is putting it in your own Charizard deck for the mirror match. Because the way Charizard works is the longer the game goes on, the more prize cards your opponent takes, it scales. So putting that Maximum Belt on really just speeds up that process. So I believe that Maximum Belt here is going to be at the top of A tier. I think it's probably one of the better Ace Specs. It's going to get played in a lot of decks to be able to deal with that with bigger EX Pokemon like Charizard EX mostly. Moving into our last Ace Spec here, we got Prime Catcher. Switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. If you do, you switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. Now, Prime Catcher is going to get played in a lot of decks purely because it's a free Gust and Switch at the same time. Being able to just maybe like pull up a Manaphy, pull up your Radiant Greninja, play a Canceling Cologne, and then Moonlight Shuriken take 2 prize cards can be really good. Or even in Snorlax Stall where they're just having an extra Gust effect without even needing prize cards to be taken to use Counter Catcher. And that's the big upside of Prime Catcher is you can use it at any point in the game. There's not really any requirements to it. You don't need to have less or more prize cards than your opponent. There doesn't need to be a knockout from the last turn or anything of that nature. Prime Catcher, I believe, is probably the best Ace Spec that we're going to get in our Temporal Forces set. So for that reason, I'm going to put it up here in S tier. Alrighty, guys, let's jump right in to that outro. Alrighty, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know down in the comments what Ace Spec you're most excited for. Me, personally, I'm most excited for Master Ball. If you guys have been enjoying the content I've been making so far on the channel, don't forget to leave a like, smash the subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace!